Easter, the festal protest against death. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Corinthians 1, 15, 54-57. With these unforgettable words, Paul celebrates the victory of life over death and sin, which makes a hell out of life in this world. But we do not find it so easy to bring ourselves to utter the song of liberty. Can one celebrate life in the midst of death? Our Argentinian friend asked us at Christmas 1978. For those of us who are living in this huge Latin American continent and tried to pass on the witness to Christ there, this question is no empty phrase. We do not just encounter death here in the framework of subversive violence and repressive countermeasures which claim their victims every day. It creeps insidiously upon us, much more cruelly in the form of increasing unemployment, the decline in the real wages of the poorest of the poor, and in the rise of infant mortality. So we have to ask ourselves whether we can really celebrate the victory of the risen Christ, or whether we should not rather weep for the triumph of Pilate and all the tyrants who followed him in history. In the prosperity of the industrial West, today many people are becoming cynical. They close their eyes and do not want to see the misery of the third world. They stop their ears and do not want to hear the cry from the depths. They only want to keep what they have, and yet they sense how meaningless their lives are becoming. In the terror of the third world, people are being driven to despair. Every day, they see violent death and are pinned to the ground, helpless. They cry out and become apathetic because no one hears. Both these experiences seem to contradict Christ's resurrection. Victory seems swallowed up in death, and hell triumphs. Not only at the end of this life, but here and now, in many countries, through the mass use of torture. Seen against the background of humanity's history of suffering, Easter is absurd, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ has no evidence to support it. For in this perspective of history, the power of death is unbroken. Even Paul saw more crosses in his lifetime and went through more persecutions than he had Easter experiences. But things are quite different if, like Paul and the first Easter witnesses, we learn to see in everyday history of suffering in the perspective of Christ's resurrection. Then it begins to be absurd to see violence and death as a matter of course. Nothing is inevitable. Nothing has to be put up with. Then faith does not simply mean considering Christ's resurrection to be true and hoping for a life after death. Faith then means, first of all, getting up oneself and participating in God's creative power. God makes the impossible possible. He calls into existence the things that do not exist. Romans 4:17. He is the creator. The Easter faith recognizes that the raising of the crucified Christ from the dead provides the great alternative to this world of death. This faith sees the rising of Christ as God's protest against death and against all the people who work for death. For the Easter faith recognizes God's passion for the life of the person who is threatened by death and with death. And faith participates in this process of love by getting up out of the apathy of misery and out of the cynicism of prosperity and fighting against death's accomplices here and now in this life. Weary Christians have often enough deleted this critical and liberating power from Easter. Their faith has been degenerated into the confident belief in certain facts and a poverty-stricken hope for the next world, as if death were nothing but a fate we meet at the end of life. But death is an evil power now in life's very midst. It's the economic death of the person we allow to starve, the political death of the people who are oppressed, the social death of the handicapped, the noisy death that strikes through napalm bombs and torture, and the soundless death of the apathetic soul. The resurrection faith is not proved true by means of historical evidence or only in the next world. It's proved here and now through the courage for revolt, the protest against deadly powers, and the self-giving of men and women for the victory of life. It's impossible to talk convincingly about Christ's resurrection without participating in the movement of the Spirit who descends on all flesh to quicken it. This movement of the Spirit is the divine liberation movement, for it is the process whereby the world is recreated. So resurrection means rebirth and out of impotence and indolence to the living hope. And today, living hope means a passion for life and a lived protest against death. The person who does not contest with the lords of this world their right to that world does not arrive at the certainty that in the end death will be swallowed up in victory. The resurrection hope is a hope which only makes sense beneath the cross, that is, in the resistance of love against death. It is this that is behind the poem written by the Swiss pastor Kurt Marti. That could just suit many a master, but a resurrection is coming, different, quite different from any we imagined. A resurrection is coming, which is God's rebellion against the masters and the master of the masters, death. Christ's resurrection is the beginning of God's rebellion. That rebellion is still going on in the spirit of hope and will be completed when together with death, every rule and every authority and power is at last abolished. Corinthians 1:15-24. Where is this added value of hope alive, and how do people experience it? Easter is a feast, and it is as the feast of freedom that is celebrated. For with Easter begins the laughter of the redeemed, the dance of the liberated, and the creative play of fantasy. From time immemorial, Easter hymns have celebrated the victory of life by laughing at death, mocking at hell, and ridiculing the mighty ones who spread fear and terror round about them. Easter sermons used once to begin with good jokes. There's a rabbinic saying that anyone who makes a person laugh opens heaven to him. Easter is a liberating feast. Where it's celebrated, people must eat and drink. The resurrection cannot be celebrated without the Eucharist, the shalom meal, which confers fellowship with the people who are hungry and thirsty. So everyone should be invited to share a bread so as to find this new community. This is true on a worldwide scale as well. Easter celebrations in the industrial West are not real feasts simply because we do not see to it that we bear an equal share of the burdens of the hungry nations. One can hardly celebrate a feast with eating and drinking behind locked doors with armed guards in front of them. Easter is the feast of freedom. It makes the life which it touches a festal life. The risen Christ makes life a perpetual feast, said Athanasius. But can the whole of life really be a feast? Even life's dark side, death, guilt, senseless suffering? I think it can. Once we realize that the giver of this feast is the outcast, suffering, crucified Son of Man from Nazareth, then every no is absorbed into this profound yes and is swallowed up in this victory. Easter is at one and the same time God's protest against death and the feast of freedom from death. Anyone who fails to hold these two things together has failed to understand the resurrection of the Christ who was crucified. Resistance is the protest of those who hope, and hope is the feast of the people who resist.